Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether we should really be accepting drinks from the bartender. Did you see that thing he tweeted back when he was 15? At a corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is talking about how much he loves Ezra Pound. The poetry of Ezra Pound, not the poet. And that's me, Matthew Mellema. And welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Well, as you may know, dear listeners, I'm a big fan of Cormac McCarthy, his writing. In terms of pure prose style, McCarthy is pretty close to the top of my all-time list. In fact, I like McCarthy's writing so much that I cannot read him when I'm working on my own writing project. Because when I do, my own writing turns into some weirdo imitation of his. So you can imagine my interest when a friend sent an exhaustive profile about Cormac McCarthy that was recently published in Vanity Fair. To be specific, the profile was about Augusta Britt. She's the woman who inspired many of McCarthy's most important literary creations. McCarthy's muse, if you will. Britt is an utterly fascinating person. Seriously, spending time with this woman in the profile is like spending time with one of McCarthy's protagonists. The two of them met when McCarthy was 42, after he'd published a couple novels, but before he'd really become famous. The two had a relationship that lasted until McCarthy's death at age 89. This relationship took many forms over the years. It was often romantic and, yes, sexual, even in the earliest years. And here's the thing. I already mentioned that McCarthy was 42 when they met. At that same time, Augusta Britt was 16. Yikes. So, what should fans of Cormac McCarthy do with all this? Or, to put it more specifically, what should I do with this? I don't exactly know. But that is the reason why, at the start of this little monologue, I made it clear that I'm a fan of Cormac McCarthy's writing. But my own little moral conundrum is hardly unique. I'm guessing most everyone listening to this has had a similar conundrum at some point in their lives. An artist who we really admire does something terrible. What do we do? How should we respond when bad people make good art? Here to discuss this and many other moral conundrums with me are the two co-hosts. Mandy, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm just wondering why that friend hates me so much is to send me that Vanity Fair link. But
I know. I read the same article.
I had a feeling you would. Yeah. It's like, oh, is this going where I think it's going? Oh, it is.
Yes,
oh, no.
It is.
And there it happened. Okay.
I'm happily ignorant. Y'all just burst my bubble over.
Trying to open your eyes, Christina.
I know. Happily
ignorant.
Yeah.
It's a gross world out there. But here's a conversation that has possibly been long in the making because we've sort of butted up against this conversation here and there for a while. Yeah, let's start with some sort of personal anecdotes here. Mandy, I gave my very unfortunate Cormac McCarthy story. Is there one in particular that's been playing on your mind recently?
The one that's in the forefront of my mind is the one I most recently found out about was some very unfortunate corroborated assault allegations against Chris Rice, which really bothers me because he's one of my favorite singers. And so that, turns your stomach. And it's not that we want or even expect our artists, everyone is flawed, but when it's harmful conduct, I can't. It's rough.
Yeah, it is, especially that type, which we will get into. I'd say that's sort of the most gut punching sort of thing that happens. Christina, how about you? Has this happened to you recently, or have you been able to remain blissfully ignorant? If so, I envy you.
No, unfortunately, blissful ignorance is not in my current repertoire. Actually, no. And even though I'd like to say I am worldly wise, I am still very ignorant on many things. No, but I mean, I would say as far as recently, yeah. I mean, honestly, it's interesting because the older I get, the more I feel like I encounter this, scenario in some way or other, even if it's just a childhood friend, right? Like, wow, I never saw that coming, or their parents did that. Oh my goodness,
Right.
that makes so much sense. Or, you know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot of that kind of stuff that in the heroes that you admire for this, that, or another reason, they fall. Heroes fall. And
Yeah.
and so I think sometimes I kind of try to see it that way with art and politics in the world in general, is like, yes, heroes fall, but what are they standing for? What are they creating? What are they like? Does that necessarily mean that those things need to be tossed out at the same time? So I would say my more personal encounters have been of the more personal nature, as far as like old friends where I've heard pretty nasty things. And
Oh, that's rough.
it is, yeah, it's pretty bad. So I would say, yeah, obviously I will not say any names or anything, but yeah. So I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, and that's a good opportunity to bring a couple caveats here because we discussed this in the green room. It's not our intention to be like gossipy or to get into like salacious details or anything like that. So a lot of times the conversation will necessitate giving some background in the conduct here, but we're going to try to keep it as high level as possible while still making the relevant point.
Have a very good question, which is, as Christians, how do we engage? And I think it's worth talking about. So thank you for bringing it up today on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of those things where I am actively struggling with it. I'm guessing a lot of listeners are too. So what I'm going to propose here is thinking about it along two different axes. Hopefully this works. If not, whatever. We can just all go back to being confused.
We tried.
But well, one of the other things I want to discuss here is the difference, because certain listeners might be hearing this and they automatically have this alarm bell going off and they're saying, cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. That is not what we're looking at here. I think there's some overlap in some forms of conduct, but that I think there is a distinction that we can draw on here. I'll flesh that out more in just a little bit, but this is not equivalent to cancel culture. I think there's some important distinctions here, which I will get into soon. Just bear with me for now, okay? So first off, I want to discuss 4 categories that I came up with in evaluating the severity of the offense. Can you tell I'm a lawyer? I just love these 4 different categories for analyzing these questions. Because
your obsession of rules, Matthew, I think everybody knows you're a lawyer by now.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So how should we do this? Should I share all 4 categories at once, or should I do one at a time to sort of build suspense?
Honestly, I'm a big believer in like lay out the spread and then back up and do one by one.
Okay. So here's the 4 categories in ascending order of severity. The least severe category is when the artist expresses an opinion, usually a political opinion, that you disagree with. Okay. So you're on the red team and you find out the artist's on the blue team, or you're on the blue team, you find out the artist's on the red team. So that's the least severe category. The second is the artist says an opinion that is genuinely offensive and outside the realms of normal political discourse. Okay. I'm sure we'll have examples of that as well. So it's not just, oh, they're on the other political side. It's, oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing to say. That's the category 2. Category 3 is bad conduct, like actual bad conduct that an actual person does by just sort of a general artist. They don't hold themselves out as a Christian or a person of faith or anything. They're just sort of out there. And there's obviously different levels of severity that we can, stair step within that. And then the most serious level of conduct, in my opinion, is when someone who holds themselves out as a Christian artist does actual bad conduct. To me, that's when things get very, very, very serious for me in my engagement with them going forward. But that's the general lay of the land. So before we dive into the details, 'cause I want to go through like each one in a little more detail, give examples. Mandy and Christina, any objections with the way I sketched this out?
I don't think so. No, I think
Yeah.
yeah, no.
Sounds good.
Wow. Things are going really well so far. Look at that. All right. So let's start off with what I consider kind of the silliest. The artist expresses opinions that you disagree with. So let me set this up. Listeners, I'm guessing we have listeners from across the political spectrum, and we don't want to get into the particulars of whatever. You do you. That's cool. But I know for me, I'm not going to share my own politics. Are you crazy? I grew up in a family that was, pretty standard Republican, evangelical Republican back in the day. And because of that, I grew up knowing that pretty much all of the Hollywood celebrities out there had different politics from me. And I learned to accept that. So that's always been a thing where I think a lot of folks in that same boat were like, oh, Brad Pitt's a Democrat? Okay, well, of course he is. They all are. Like we had Clint Eastwood, and that was it. Well, we had Clint Eastwood and Chuck Norris and maybe Kelsey Grammer, but that's all.
Mel Gibson.
We had him for a while, but then who knows what he's doing now? He started his own political movement for what I don't know. Anyway, so it would kind of. I always found it kind of amusing when you'd see folks who were on the other side try to deal with this issue for the first time. Like I remember Dennis Miller, who is a SNL guy who's on Weekend Update comedian. He's famously Republican, or he was. I don't know what he's doing now. So I was reading this roundtable from like pretty typical like Brooklyn progressives about SNL folks. And this guy had to write this whole like thesis justifying him liking Dennis Miller, even though he has different politics. It's like, bro, welcome to my world. Like, this is not a thing. Everyone disagrees with me. Get over it. This isn't a thing. So you'll see this now sometimes where, there's a big to-do about like the Snow White actress or something. This happens from both sides. Red people are now getting more offended at the blue people. And you see it from both sides. I think it's almost universally silly, just disliking someone because they're on the different political team. Yeah. Maybe I'm the naive one here. I don't know. Mandy, you want to justify shunning people for different politics?
Nope. Because
Okay.
I have completely changed my politics over time. So it's like it would be completely ridiculous because then I would be shutting out completely opposite people than I used to. So
the people you used to shun are back in, and now you're shunning.
Yeah,
that's just
I just think that doesn't make any sense. If I'm spending money somewhere where I know they're giving to a cause that I think is damaging, then I'm not going to help them have more money to give to a cause that I think is damaging. But that's different. If you're talking about like, I'm not going to stop watching movies with people who vote differently than I do, because I vote all over the place anyway. So
yeah, like there was a big controversy because like Sydney Sweeney's parents were wearing like a MAGA hat, and it's like, okay, people.
Well, Snoop Dogg has confused everyone, by the way. Like nobody likes Snoop Dogg now.
That's the Snoop real secret. Is as an artist, you need to confuse everyone so that no one.
There you go.
Not to dislike you.
How about you, Christina? Do you shun all the celebrities who don't hold your political views?
Every single one. No. I almost put in an expletive just to be extra. Very John Wayne-ish right there.
Speaking, she only watches John Wayne movies. No one else is acceptable.
No, absolutely not. I do not shun anybody for their political views.
Yeah, to me, it's, because, again, there's always a controversy of the month, something that gets, like, ginned up on MSNBC or Fox News or whatever, and it's usually some celebrity says an opinion of, like, the blue team, and then the red team just gets all bothered by it. I think mostly it's pretty silly. And also, if that is how you are inclined to think, like, you're not going to see the crappy Snow White remake because Rachel Zegler said something silly for the blue team. First of all, there's other good reasons to not see the Snow White movie, like because it's really bad. But second, I think that says more about you than it does about the movie. and again, this applies to both sides now.
Yeah.
If politics is so important to you that you will not engage in an otherwise good art form because the artist disagrees with your politics, I think maybe that says a lot about your politics and the pride of place that has in your life. So to me, this is sort of the one that's the easiest to dispose of, even though it takes up the largest percentage of silly online discourse. So there we go with that. Now the next level up, and there's a little bleeding through. There's some gray, blurry lines in between. There's the artist it's not just they say something for the red team when you're on the blue team. It's the artist says something that's genuinely really bonkers and offensive. Now, a lot of times if you have the partisan lenses on, you'll think, oh, he supports the Democrats, so that's just inherently offensive. No, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about something outside the Overton window. The span of opinions it's acceptable to have on a given topic in polite society. The Overton window changes over time, but we all have a general idea of what opinions you are and aren't allowed to basically express in public. I don't think I need to go through each and every one, but suffice to say the opinions of someone like Kanye would often fall outside the Overton window now.
Yeah.
So, Mandy, has this ever happened to you where an artist you otherwise admire just went outside the Overton window and like, oh, that's bonkers?
Yeah, man, I used to listen to Kanye all the time. No, I don't know. I'm too old. Oh, I was supposed to not make fun of myself for being old. Oops. It lasted like half an hour. There we go. Typically, if it's like a slur or if it's hate based is when I'm going to be like, it's really hard for me to enjoy. I don't want to name anyone because I don't want to alienate people. Anyway, there are a couple of singers that I just can't listen to because of some things that they've said it's just hateful, and so then it like taints the way I hear the music.
That you'd previously listened to a lot?
One of them, not a lot, but I mean, I had some Spotify, but then there was some N-word getting thrown around and claims that they don't ever really say that, but I don't know. I don't feel like that word comes out of your mouth like out of nowhere. But anyway, hard to believe the only time you ever said it, somebody was recording. Anyway, so stuff like that. It's not necessarily, and I don't know, maybe this is a bad thing to say this, but I don't necessarily on principle say, oh no, I shall not partake but I can't forget it. Like it gets stuck in my head. Like I don't want to spend time with someone who is hateful or harmful, and it's not something, going back to the cancel culture thing. Notice I'm not saying who it is because I am big into let everybody figure it out for themselves. I'm just choosing for me. I'm not going out there on a crusade and like posting stuff and saying everyone needs to stop listening to this person. I just figure everybody's going to choose based on their own conscience. Now, that's only because we're only on the second level.
Yes, we're still on tier 2.
Yeah. It varies as we go up. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think this is good because it makes it more concrete here. So we have this example where it sounds like it's a musician. This white musician is caught saying the N-word on a recording. And I agree with you, Mandy.
It's more than that. Yeah.
So it's more than that, but let's sort of isolate it just for the sake of the hypothetical, right?
Okay.
Where we have reason to believe there might be some more going on. So, Mandy, it sounds like you've decided I'm just not comfortable listening to this dude's music anymore. If you have a friend who's like, yeah, I get what he said, it was horrible, that was awful, but I still enjoy the music. What would you say to that?
Oh, I have friends who still listen. That's not my business. They're grown up. And they're still my friends. I can't relate to them not being uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that's their choice. I made my choice,
So that's the follow-up question then. Do you think your decision to not listen to him anymore is like I'm doing the moral thing, whereas if making the opposite decision is the immoral thing, or it's like, I'm not comfortable with it, but if someone feels different than me, you do you.
Yeah, I don't think it's a moral or amoral thing at this level of what we're talking about.
Mhm. And again,
uh,
we're in the hypothetical of like
yeah.
the racial slur
I
connotation.
mean, it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're listening to songs where he's using the slur, then I think we might need to have a little talk about that. But no, for me, I'm just uncomfortable. I can't. To me, it feels like I'm spending time with the person, and I just don't really want to spend time with the person, the
Yeah.
singer,
So
not the friend, not the friend. The friend, that's fine, but I'm not going to go
so
to a concert for that person with the friend.
I remember when this first started happening to Mel Gibson, because
Yeah,
remember when he made The Passion, he had his
yeah,
moment where
yep,
everything was going great. And there was that sort of mini controversy like, is The Passion anti Semitic? And I still feel this way. My answer was like, no, it's not. Stop making up
no,
stuff. It's silly to say it's anti Semitic. But after I'm
right.
making that, this recording comes of Mel
He's
Gibson
anti-Semitic. Yeah,
drunkenly asking the cop pulling him over for DUI if he's Jewish. And it's like, oh my gosh, Mel
yeah,
Gibson's an anti-Semite.
yeah.
Oh no. And it's like, and Mel Gibson did plenty of other stuff after this. So it's moving beyond that. But
Yeah,
like isolating
way
it just
beyond.
at the hypothetical, it's like, it's
Oh,
kind of weird going back. I don't think I've watched The Passion of the Christ after that. And I don't know if it's been a conscious decision, but it would, I'm trying to think how I would feel going back and watching it now. Cause I think the film itself, I still don't believe is anti-Semitic, but
but you might
knowing
look
that
for it.
knowing that even it's just sort of in the dark
Yeah,
recesses of Mel Gibson's brain that only comes out when he's drunk,
yeah,
that's still kind of weird. I honestly don't know how I'd engage with that now.
yeah.
And that's a question too. I think, were we as artists, I mean, and this is partly modern society, in that all of our business, when we're published or when our art is disseminated, is all over the internet. Everybody starts to know everything about us unless we're very careful to keep our private lives private. And so is it necessarily a good thing that, thinking back to the Mel Gibson thing, is it detrimental that we know so much about Mel Gibson's private life and his private thoughts that we can now not encounter this art without asking questions that sort of like, well, what might have informed this? And now we can't take this for granted. Do we need to like re-examine it and analyze it, as opposed to what it actually appeared to be on the surface and still kind of seems to be, which is a very powerful movie that has nothing to do with anti-Jews.
Yeah, so would I be better off if I didn't know anything about Mel Gibson's personal life and could just enjoy the movie on its own merits?
But not
Probably yes, right? Like then I'd have this movie that I would still.
Well, right. So you'd be better off. But go ahead, Christina. What?
well, yeah, because it's not like that. It's not the turn a blind eye question. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm basically saying, because of how much of all of art right now is not as much about the art as it is about the celebrity behind the art. Some of these big blockbuster things, the big novels, the big authors, the big artists, the big film producers and cinematographers, etc., composers. Is it a detriment to know so much about their personal lives that we can't engage with their art without seeing their dirty laundry? Because good art stands on its own, that when we start to tie in too much the failures of humanity to every single piece of art that person has ever made, we start to get in muddy waters, and then we start to feel like the integrity of the art was infected and we can no longer appreciate it for what it was. There is a line. There's an answer to that question. It's not necessarily a line in the sand, because I think sometimes there are times where we have to like re-examine all that art and say, but then I think there are also times where we need to say, that person probably would rather have not that come out and probably regrets that. And you know what? I just need to look back at this piece of art for what it was and what it was intended to be, and let that personal moment be their personal moment that they go to God with, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it totally depends on the level. And I think that's what you're
Does.
saying.
I think it does. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what I'm saying is in things like that, and especially in the modern approach to how we view sort of the celebrity artist or the celebrity lifestyle. We are all up in their business. And so there is never anything that anyone does that no one else doesn't know about.
Yeah, I think the flip side for me, though, is I kind of abhor celebrity in general, the whole idea of celebrity and the fact that they just by virtue of who they are, they get a pass or they get special treatment. I just cannot stand that. And so, like, just to go back to the previous, like, hypothetical, I should say the person I was talking about who said the N word, it was not to a black person. They were not attacking a black person. If they were doing that, then we are into the bad conduct. That's different. Like it was like as a curse word, and it was something I think he thought was funny. So that's the level we're talking about. I want to make that clear. Once a celebrity, and I think that's what we're talking about here, not just artists, but like celebrity artists, when they are actively harming someone who is at a lower status than they are, I can't support that. And to me, I want to know that. I want to know that not for my sake, but for the sake of the people that are being harmed by that celebrity. They are getting away with it because of their celebrity. You know what I mean? And so if they continue to get away with whatever, if they're treating people poorly and there's no accountability for it, then they're going to continue treating people poorly, which is bad for the people and it's bad for them because then when are they going to, why would they care? And why would they seek to grow and to learn and not harm people if there's no consequence? I see what you're saying. I don't want to know like every little single thing about people, but I do want to know if someone's harming someone because I don't want to be supporting that.
Right. I think I was thinking more
Yeah.
the Matt's Mel Gibson situation where he happened
Right.
to say that.
Yeah, I know. I kind of went off from that. I
Mandy, you're
wasn't.
getting into level 3. We're still on level
Sorry.
2.
Sorry. Sorry.
But yeah, I do think there are a couple things to disentangle from that. Is one, there is a difference between just for my sort of silly levels here, having an offensive opinion versus actively harming someone, right? And then there's some gray area, there's some bleed over, but I do think that is sort of a categorical distinction, right? Because if someone has a stupid and offensive opinion, that might be bad, but that's different than someone actively harming someone.
You know what?
To,
Now though, I'm thinking maybe that does actively harm people, even if he wasn't saying it to. Anyway,
I mean, yeah, I
sorry.
mean, you can say that.
I don't
I'm
know.
I'm a little skeptical of the speech being violence thing in general, just because I deal with some weirdo lawyers out there. But I do get that there are some blurring of the categories there.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also the difference between turning a blind eye and just not actively seeking it out. The turning the blind eye is going to be a lot more salient when we get into level 3 because that's
Yeah.
actually that can oftentimes be people harmed. But the not seeking it out, I do think there is merit to that. Like let's say you're reading a book of poems, you come across a poem by a poet you've never heard of, and you're like, oh, what a wonderful poem. Then you could seek out that poet to see if they've ever said anything naughty on Instagram, or you could just
Right.
enjoy the poem and move on. Like
Right.
I think that might be sort of the distinction to make there. But with that said, now let's move in to the very bad behavior, tier 3, the actual bad conduct. And again,
An artist, right?
yes, just sort of a
Right.
general artist out there who's actively doing something harmful. So I don't need to lay out the types of bad behavior. We all know what this is.
Yeah.
So Mandy, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but how does that change your opinion? There's an artist, a writer, a musician that you like and admire. You find out they're actually engaged in very bad conduct.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. I I'm done. No. I can't support people who are harming other people because um even though art can stand on its own, I mean, we know we are artists. it comes from us. It comes out of us. I'm really bummed I don't get to watch the Cosby Show anymore, but I'm not gonna. Like, I'm not watching the Cosby Show anymore. Sorry, not sorry. I mean, if I saw a man on the street harming someone, I would want to do something about it. Like, I would want there to be some kind of accountability. And if that's the only accountability that I can give, I don't know. I feel like it's honoring and esteeming the person if you continue to consume their art and if they have proven themselves to be harmful. I just can't do that.
So there's a couple gradations that I want to talk about here. First off, there's an example that may belong in tier 2, but it may go to tier 3. I mentioned Ezra Pound during my little opening spiel, and he is the perfect example of has just very bad and offensive opinions. And he was he was a fascist, not the type where he went through, like, in the 20s. He heard a lecture when he was in college and did like a stupid college thing. It's like, no. After World War II, after everything was out there, he was like, oh, frick yeah, I'm still a fascist. So with all of the attendant things that come along with it. So that is, I feel like I'm on strong ground saying I'm against fascism and Nazism. And I think that almost rises to the level of tier 3. But with that said, I think his poetry is really, really good. Like, I love his poetry, and I've been wrestling with that for a long time. I wrote a piece that was published online a while ago. This is kind of a digression, but I feel like I need to make it. Have you ever heard some people saying that we might be accidentally creating a digital dark age in the future, where a lot of the content that we're writing and posting online is going to get lost, and then people in the future just won't have access to it?
Oh, no.
So about 10 years ago, I wrote this piece. I think it was for Pathos or something, basically wrestling with this very topic about how I could love the poetry of Ezra Pound. He wrote this poem about Jesus that is actually really moving, but he's a horrible human. So it's like, how do you wrestle with that? I wrote it on Pathos. I just tried to Google it. It's not there. So it's just friggin' gone.
Your article is gone?
My article's gone. So I was going to try to crib from it, but I know I just need to make it up again. But that was something that I still feel like there isn't a clear answer, because on the one hand, I think Ezra Pound's poetry is beautiful. He's written some of my favorite poems, which feels weird to say because he was such a horrible person. So on the one hand, it's like, okay, this guy, he's dead. He had horrible opinions, but even horrible people can create beautiful things, right? So should I just appreciate the beautiful work and leave it aside, or should I view it as the poetry is bound up to this awful poet? And I don't think there's a clear answer to that, and it's kind of weird. But that leads me to another consideration there, Mandy, and it's, does your calculus change if the artist in question is dead? So, like, they died 100 years ago, so you could make an argument like, me consuming their art doesn't really affect them anymore. I'm not aiding and abetting anything. Or does that not change your calculus?
I think we should change the way in which we engage it. And one really good example is Picasso. Horrible man. Do you know that he said that each time he used the word change. Each time I change wives, I wish I could burn the last one. I mean, that's how horrible. Yeah, like burn, so that he didn't have to deal with them at all. He also famously ruined the career of his last wife. I say, do a display of Picasso's work alongside the art of the woman that he tried to ruin. Like, how about that? There's actually an art installation right now in the Tate in Britain. Back in the 1920s, they commissioned a mural by Rex Whistler, no relation. It was not his mother. There's a mural in the Tate, Britain, that's called the Expedition in Pursuit of Rare Meats, which is a terrible title because it actually conveys like a a little boy slave getting dragged along the ground. I don't know why the museum wanted this painted on their wall, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So they closed that part of the museum for a really long time. But what they did just a few years ago is they reopened it. So the mural is there, and alongside it is a film installation by a Black artist, a British artist, Keith Piper. In the film that is the installation, he plays the role of an art professor, and the art installation is called Viva Voce, which apparently is what they call an oral exam of an art student, where the professors question them about their art. And so now that mural is still there, but the film is running, where this current Black British author, Keith Piper, is acting out, asking Rex Whistler about the art. And he's directly confronting the racist horrors that are in the painting. And it's not just like a factually, it's very disturbing. Like, there's hateful aspects to the art. It's not just that it's painting slavery. So you know what I mean? So I think there are ways to engage with the art. I think we need to acknowledge what was harmful, because that's how we learn from it. But in most cases, I do think it does change. I'm not going to I don't really like Picasso that much anyway. Degas was not a great guy, by the way, but I love a Degas painting. I think he was super anti-Semitic. Gauguin was, this is the difference though. Gauguin actually painted some of the people he victimized. I am not going to look at a Gauguin. Okay. I'm not going to look at his native paintings. No. And then there's another American artist, Eric Gill. Don't look him up. Seriously. All of his models, he abused all of his models. So I can't partake in that, because I feel like even partaking in art is honoring the art in some way. And I can't do that when the actual harmful thing is part and parcel with what I'm looking at. So if Ezra had written poems and odes to fascism, then you're not going to want to read that.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point. And I think because, kind of like you were saying, like, some of the subjects of his paintings were human. I'm assuming you're talking about like human. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. And I agree. I feel like there's something just in me that reacts, right, as a human to another human who was used or whatever, and then kind of forced him to being like, hey, but also you're my painting, and I'm just gonna like use you as my model and then throw you out there and then treat you how I want. Like there is something that reacts inside me viscerally when I'm like, no, I don't want to honor that. I want to give this woman the space that she deserves that you never gave her, apparently,
Child.
Oh gosh, yeah. See, so there's like situations like that, right? I think where it gets a little bit more complicated is kind of like Matthew, you were saying, like Ezra Pound, if it was about fascism, that he was like worshiping fascism, maybe not so much. But if it's a beautiful poem, right, about Jesus, I think for me where some of this comes in is, where do we live with this Christian imagination that we talk about? The entrance to our podcast, right? How can we live with a Christian imagination? And I think a Christian imagination has to look at everything, not just with an eye to see, what's wrong, but with an eye to the redeeming qualities, kind of like we have like general and special revelation. If all of the world proclaims God's glory, then there is God's glory to be found even in the works of evil people, not particularly necessarily those works themselves, but there are things that people in sin have done or created that actually can still speak and move. And so I kind of wanted to throw that out there too, because I do think truth can stand on its own. I think God is over all of these things. I think he has a way of speaking to his people through other people. And I think God can transcend the evil that man does and speak through the beauty that was created in certain situations, not saying
Right.
all. And I also kind of just wanted to suggest too, like we hadn't talked about the nuances of consuming art from a person before they had committed whatever evil deed that we, were aware of or whatever it was. Like, what about the art in this time of their life that they didn't particularly hold to this belief, or they didn't particularly do these actions? Does that automatically make that art bad too? Or does the art sort of get like, quote unquote, contaminated once the human being has, quote unquote, like fallen, or, so I just feel like there's a lot of like little tiny nuances where we have to say, are we evaluating the art or are we evaluating the artist, and where do they separate and how? And I think partly what you were saying, Matthew, is like, yes, there's those levels. That's kind of why you created them to begin with, the conduct versus the, just the like saying something we disagree with, right? And I think there has to be some very, very real rules and virtuous responses that Christians have to a lot of this conduct from Christian artists or non-Christian artists. I don't know that our reactions should be different. I think we should be harsher on Christian artists for bad conduct, but I don't know that,
And you are peeking ahead to tier 4, Christina. We are still on tier 3.
Well, I guess we have a habit of doing that, don't we?
No, but Christina, I think that was really good, and I agree with that. And just a couple things to add on to it, because I do think a lot of this is, if we're going to engage with art by an artist who has, especially once we get to the conduct level, like the bad conduct,
Yeah.
I do think we need to have the sort of template for evaluating why we're doing it. And I think both you and Mandy touched on some of that. So the first off is the bad conduct related to the art. Like, is the creation of the art itself a bad part of the bad conduct?
Yeah.
And like, that's what you were saying with some of the artists. Like, to me, if it's a painting of a model that I know the artist abused, to me, that's an easy call. I'm not engaging with that art. I don't care how technically proficient or beautiful the painting is. If I know the act of creation, it was kind of a form of abuse, I'm out. I think that's actually a pretty easy call. I'm with you on that one, man.
You're participating in it, really.
So that's the first thing, and that's not always going to be the case with this. But if that's the case, I do think that that ends the inquiry pretty much.
Yeah.
Second, it's does consuming the art give tangible support to the artist? And that is an easier case if the artist is dead, right? You don't need that part. But even if the artist is alive, that's something you can consider. Like, is it a book I already bought before I knew about this? Well, that can be different than going out and buying the book. And that can be different to each case as well. But then the final thing, and this is the one that I
like boycotting versus like, how do we support royalties and do we want to? Like, I feel like that's another category in itself, kind of like you were saying. Like, where does that come in versus like just on moral integrity levels? How do we treat the art? And then where's the like, no, I will not support, I will not speak of, I will not give money to, I will, actively say nobody should do this because this person is this. I will be a voice of, letting everyone know the truth, kind of thing. So I think there can be like a couple different levels. So
there's definitely gradations here. Like, you could take it like, what if a comedian, like, should I not watch a comedian's video because it adds a view to the count? You could say that's kind of de minimis, and then it would depend on, well, what did the comedian do? And you need to look at it that way. So there's gradations within all of this. And there's very few clear-cut answers once we get to that level. But then the one that comes back to me the most, and maybe I'll just touch on here, we can get back to it more. Even let's assume the art in the bad conduct are totally separate, right? Like, there's no link between them. And let's assume there's no conceivable way that me interacting with the art could give tangible support to the artist. Like, they died in 1750 or whatever. Does consuming art by an artist who I know has done lots of bad stuff, does that just like stain me in some way? Like, does that just affect me in some way, even if there's no tangible difference to it?
Tier 3, or I mean in tier 4?
So maybe we should hold that until we get to tier 4. Let's go to tier 4 now. So it's just sort of, you guys be processing that one in the back of your heads. Let's get to tier 4, the one I consider the most serious, the bad conduct by folks who hold themselves out as Christians. So they're a Christian artist, they're a Christian musician, they're a theologian or something like that. And for me personally, I will admit I hold these folks to much, much higher standards than to other folks. Like there was a one kind of Christian comedian who I kind of liked, and he engaged in behavior that I would say was sleazy, not criminal, but sleazy. Where if it was just a normal comedian, I might have just like rolled my eyes, be like, what do you do? He's kind of a creep, but he's funny. But for because this is a guy who holds himself out as a Christian comedian, I'm like, I'm hard out. I'm totally done with this guy. And I told Danielle after I learned about it, I was like, I'm freaking furious with this dude. I'm so angry. Yep. With again, stuff that I thought was sleazy, but not like criminal. Another example that I can be a little bit more concrete with, because the guy's dead. In some of the circles we all go in, some folks really like Karl Barth, the Reformed theologian. Mm-hmm. I struggle with him for a single reason. I'll use very euphemistic terms here, inappropriate relationship he had with his secretary behind his wife's back, and not so much behind his wife's back, for years and years. For me, if you are a theologian and you are trying to write about the heart and the motivations and the mind of God, I don't want someone who's just a unrepentant adulterer out there. Mm-mm. That's the sort of stuff where if you're just like a novelist, I can be like, okay, this guy's a creep, but he writes good novels. But if you're a theologian, I'm kind of hard out on that.
No, I agree with you. Ravi Zacharias is an example of that. Oh, yeah.
Well, he's just like an extreme example, right?
Extreme. But you were still hearing people say, especially after he died, but his writing glorifies God, so you can separate it. And I'm like, you know what? No, you can't.
I can't.
He is still a man, and we don't have to have his theological books. We have the Bible, and we have plenty of theological books from people who did not like rape and sexually assault people. So absolutely not. I don't care if he, if you tattooed a quote by him on your arm because it was so, and sounded so inspired. I don't care. No.
I do have to say one quick thing though. I don't know that I would consider him an artist. And I think where we're kind of talking about this, you have to sort of say, okay, he said a lot of good things, but if he's writing on scripture, that can be easily corroborated with, and same with Karl Barth, with other Christians and theologians who have written on the same thing. But when we're talking about like creative art, I feel like that has a little bit of a different...
Well, yeah, I would say it was creative nonfiction. I still think it was creative, but I do see what you're saying. Like we went way far into like theologians, not just...
Right. Like that kind of stuff is right. Like, okay, yes, you're saying a truth there. I won't buy your book, but what you still said is truth because it's theology. And so, like, I feel like that's just different than saying, like, this creative work of art you created as a bad human.
Yeah, so first off there, it is worth noting that, we're talking about, Karl Barth's theologian. Ravi Zacharias was like a Christian apologist or whatever. So that is different.
Okay, but if Ravi Zacharias had been a singer or a novelist, I would still be like hard out.
Well, I would too, but I still think that's a conversation.
No, I know. I'm just saying, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think because I think the parameters have to be, if we're talking about artists, not just like,
Yeah. And there is I do hold theologians to an extremely high standard because to me, it's not just an academic subject. I don't want someone who knows a lot about God. I want someone who knows God. And that's right. It. If you are going to engage in open and notorious abuse of others, I just I'm going to say I don't think you know God very well. So I don't really care. I don't care to hear what you have to say about the subject.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I think what makes me furious about that in particular is like you are standing for God, and here you are making all of the like horrific things that. Yeah. Anyway. So, but that's why I was like, I don't know if we want to go far into that field because that's more of a like I am preaching a lifestyle and living a different one.
I think that's true of like a singer of worship songs and Christian songs, because those are just theology.
Sorry, I think we're more in category 4 now. You're right. I'm kind of thinking still sort of in like category 3, but you're right.
Yeah, because that's theology in songs. So they are like holding themselves up as someone to be emulated.
Yeah, I also hold, if you are writing like worship songs or something that's meant to be used in church, I also hold you to the highest standard, because that plays a very important formational role, and I don't want someone having that role who evidently doesn't know the God that they're writing the songs about. So those allegations, if they're corroborated allegations like you were talking about, Mandy, it's like, I'm done with you, dude. May you find forgiveness, but also I'm never going to listen to your songs again.
No.
Right. It's a very interesting thing, because I think when you get to the point where you have someone who proclaims to be a Christ follower and proclaims to know God to that way and says, I am producing something as a Christian that I want you to consume, knowing that I'm a Christian, then basically you are literally putting your entire faith, you're wedding your faith to your art. And you are doing it whether intentionally or not. Some people, some artist Christians will produce art and, not make it explicitly Christian. But for whatever reason, like, you are a Christian, this art represents you, and it comes directly from who you are and the well of who you are. And I think that's where, if we're talking more explicitly about, kind of like the theologian and the singer-songwriters who do Christian songs, I think that's where we need to kind of go back to Paul and some of his words, as he's kind of warning people about just like, watch for the wolves in sheep's clothing, they are there, and you do, as Christians, we can't just, say, oh, but they're a Christian, God will forgive them. Let's keep going here. You have to hold someone to a standard and say, wait a second, where does everything that they've stood for previously need to be re-examined by me as a consumer? And where do I need to say, maybe all these things that I thought wasn't what I thought they were? It gets really tricky, because sometimes that's not necessarily true. Sometimes, I don't know that I think of it. I think there's a couple people, names I won't name, but I think there's a couple examples where you could say, in this earlier version of this person's life, they created something very true and beautiful, and it was, Christian, and I would say it's still arguably true and beautiful. But then in this later version of their life, they made some turns, made some decisions, and their continued art that they've produced is actually not representative of a good person and good theology and good beliefs and good behavior.
Yeah.
So where do we say, okay, this thing that changed my life, like when I was 10, that you did when you were, 40, and now that I'm like 35 and you're whatever, I don't do math. Anyway, now I think you're this like supremely messed up human, and I will not engage with anything you do. Do I need to also throw out what you did that really moved me when I was 10? And I think the answer to that, in my opinion, is no, but that's because I think truth stands on its own. But again, I think that's where the whole conversation about like, okay, but do you boycott this person? Do you say, do you preach all over like, oh, I love this person, they changed my life when I was 10, but also don't pay attention to who they are now? There's just a lot of icky questions. And I think what it comes down to is, well, you know what? I don't know what it comes down to. That's why we're talking.
Well,
what do you guys think it comes down to?
I would say I hardly ever do the boycott thing. I'm not going to tell people. I don't do like the campaigns of boycotting, and I don't think that's what
people do. Yeah. So I'm just,
no, I know, but I think what we're talking about is different from that. But I will say, I wanted to say something, going back a little bit. I think it's important to make a distinction, and this is the same. Well, I don't want to go too far afield, but I'm not saying this person can't still be saved, that they still can't be forgiven. I'm just saying you need to step aside and not be a public person, because you are leading people astray.
Oh, yeah.
Because your life is not reflecting what you're purporting it to reflect, you know? So I'm not saying this person needs to be completely like gone out of existence. I'm just saying, find another job, find a job that where you are not leading millions of people or thousands of people with a false face. It's like Karen Swallow Prior says, instead of wolves in sheep's clothing, she says wolves in shepherd's clothing. Think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make here, because I don't want it to come across that all three of us are being like just totally unforgiving, not showing any grace to people. First of all, like, these people, I don't know them, so it's really not my place to forgive them. But second, they can absolutely find forgiveness. They can repent. I hope they do. I really do. Yeah. But repentance doesn't always mean you get back to the original platform you had, the original position you had. Yes. A lot of times, especially you can see with
undoing the awful things that were done. Yeah.
Exactly. Especially for a lot of these folks, I think a primary problem with, especially in like the Christian music and like comedy scene, is these are people who are, you know, if you're a comedian, he's pretty clever, he's pretty funny, and he grew up in the Christian world, so he can like make comments about it. And same thing for like Christian musicians. They're pretty good musicians. They know how to write the lyrics that appeal to Christians. That doesn't mean they've necessarily had a lot of spiritual formation. That doesn't mean they're mature. That doesn't mean they're necessarily even strongly committed Christians. All it means is that they can code talk to Christians. So for those people, a lot of times maybe true repentance means, like you said, Mandy, stepping out of the spotlight. Clearly, having this attention on you is bad for your soul. Like, if you should not do this, if you truly believe what you say you believe, this isn't the way for you. And maybe repentance means, like you said, Mandy, getting a different job and stepping out of the spotlight. So that's, oh boy. Yeah. And there's so many gradations with that, right?
Yeah.
And I think, going back to what you said, Christina, something I found myself struggling with is, it's artists who wrote a Christian song that was very meaningful to me at one point, and then later, after that, their life went totally off the rails. And part of me is just like, well, this guy's just like a fraud, so why should I engage with that at all? The other part's like, well, this song still stands on its own. Maybe I shouldn't let his later bad choices impact the song itself. And I kind of struggle with that, and I'm not sure I have a very good answer to that. I heard Christina's thoughts on that. Mandy, what do you think about that particular sub-issue?
I struggle with it, and I think sometimes I'm just like, and it depends. If it, like Christina, the way you were talking about it, you're talking about a song that was like an anchor point or like a formational thing. So that's not easy to replace. But in many cases, there's so much good art out there. I can afford to stop listening to Chris Rice, even though it makes me sad because I like his songs. There are other songs, you know, God's Truth is not, that Chris Rice songs don't have some pocket of God's truth that nobody else has ever touched on. So I can get the richness of God from other also imperfect people, you know, but maybe not that imperfect. I don't know. It's just especially bad when they use the influence that we gave them to conduct the abuse. That's where it, like, because I don't like that.
Tricky.
Yeah. But
all right, so we're coming up on our time here, and you know, listeners, we're trying to look out for you. We try to land the plane at a destination, feel like we've made a journey. We have like action points or whatever. Have we done that here? Have we done that? I feel like a lot of this is like, I don't know. It's a really tough thing, and I don't know what to do. But here's what I would say. I do think a lot of this is, first step is being intentional with knowing how and why you're engaging with this. Not doing it thoughtlessly, not being like, whatever, I still like the song. At least approaching it through a context. I do think having the tiers, the levels, is at least something, because I think there's a world of difference between someone expressing a political opinion you disagree with saying something that's actually wildly offensive and hurtful, to actual conduct, to actual conduct by someone who holds themselves out as like a representative of Christianity. So I think that's part of it. Then another part of the analysis is, like we were saying, is the bad conduct intertwined with the art?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, it might be an easy quiz, because if it's intertwined, then you know that that's something separate. Also, are you actually supporting the artist, or is that not? And then the final question that I want to circle back to is consuming art by an artist who you know did something bad. Is that just a stain, irrespective of all the other stuff? Even if you know it's not providing any material support to them, even if you know that the bad conduct is separate from the art as much as that can be, is that like a stain on you? Is that like a moral stain on you? Like, am I doing something bad just by enjoying the art?
Do you mean reputationally or actually?
Just you, even if no one knows. Like, you're reading a poem by a poet who you know is very bad. No, you already bought the book.
The poem
before you knew anything. The dude's long dead. The poem is about a subject completely unrelated from the bad conduct. No one else knows you're gonna read it.
Wow.
Is there still something bad just interacting with this work of art written by a bad person?
Oh my gosh.
I personally would have a hard time with that, especially if, as I said before, my hard line is if they've harmed people, like if it's harmful.
Okay, so then it'd be like the tier 2, tier 3 distinction.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine, what if Mary Oliver? No, she would never. What if with there? No. That's a tough one. I think, to me, I just end up getting. I don't really feel tempted to. Well, I guess with Chris Rice, I do. I really do like his music, but I'll get over it. I don't think of it in terms of it being a stain on me as much as it's just, I feel uncomfortable. So maybe that's the Holy Spirit telling me it is. Like, yeah, I don't know. Wow. Didn't I answer that so succinctly?
What about you, Christina?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so interesting to think about, and kind of like you were saying, like, Mandy, like, Mary Oliver, no, she would never. Wendell Berry, he would never. But then you're like, oh, well, we used to think that about, Zacharias, or, and so I think there is that question where we just have to say how much of this is humanity being fallen, and how much of this is like redeemable goodness in the quality of the work that stands on its own. And so for me, I think to going into that question, Matthew, I think that would have to be a conversation between me and the Holy Spirit. And I think there's a difference between feeling a guilt out of fear and a difference between feeling guilt, like stain, right, out of fear, and then guilt out of feeling like, you know what? I just don't feel like this is wholesome for me, and I think there are more wholesome things out there.
There you go.
I think there can be a difference, and I can potentially answer your question, Matthew, without having a certain like representative portion of whatever said art is in front of me, because I think my answer would probably be different depending on the case.
Yeah, I have a hard time with hypotheticals.
Yeah, it's very context dependent is the thing.
Yes.
Like,
it is. If you wanted me to lean towards an answer, though, my answer would lean towards a no. I would not feel a personal stain, unless, again, convicted by the Holy Spirit, something was pretty wrong.
All right. Well,
you didn't answer.
You noticed. So for me, a lot of that is the tier 2 versus tier 3 distinction. I will put up with a lot of really dumb opinions by artists. Yes. Like, that's just part of it. And, like reading different people throughout history, different history have had horrible opinions on things. We all probably have horrible opinions that people in the future will look back on and be like, how could they think that?
I have had horrible opinions. Maybe now some of my opinions are horrible, and I don't know that, but I will down the road. So I think you're robbing yourself if you don't engage with people who think differently than you. That's silly.
Yeah. So tier 3 is where it gets hard, and I think that's very context dependent, because it goes to a lot of the other questions I was asking, where if it's intertwined with it, all of that. But Okay, assuming it's not intertwined, assuming I'm not tangibly supporting the artist, they did actual bad conduct. It's at least tier 3. It depends. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It does.
like it would depend. Like, would it be like? Could I pick out like, okay, well, this is a really beautiful sentiment that I feel like I can disentangle from it, or would it be entangled in my mind? And is that an objective thing, or is that just me feeling a certain way, right? And I honestly don't know. It really depends. And gosh, I screwed that up at the very last question that I assigned.
Hey, but that's why it's good. There's so much good art out there, and art, we need to keep making it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And honestly, keep making good art, pray often, be discerning, take things to the Lord as often as possible. And that's the best we can do.
Yeah.
All right.
And a little side note, just like her name was Françoise Guillot, the one who Picasso tried to destroy. So there you go.
Right.
There we go. And, well, that's a good note to close things out on, actually. Okay. And as y'all can probably tell, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub.
Wait,
fire's down to
drinks from the bartender, Matthew?
Oh, we did.
Yeah.
We did. We decided it was just we decided it was just a bad political opinion, so it's okay. It's okay. We'll let him have his silly opinions and pour us our drinks, so we're fine. But the fire is down to embers, and you have polished off that final glass from that problematic bartender. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have an extra, I don't know, maybe 50 seconds or so right now, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.